Self-preservation is not about pushing people away. It's about protecting the space that allows you to bring your best self forward. When you're constantly absorbing other people's negativity, criticism, or manipulation, you don't just lose time, you lose clarity, creativity, and the ability to make sound decisions. Smart people understand that their mental and emotional energy is a limited resource, and they treat it with care. They know that when you guard that energy, you're not being cold, you're being responsible. It's easy to confuse self-preservation with selfishness, especially if you've been taught to always put others first. But there's a difference between generosity and self-sacrifice to the point of harm. If your kindness is draining you instead of energizing you, it stops being sustainable. Smart people recognize that they can't pour from an empty cup. They make sure their internal well-being is stable so they can keep showing up with authenticity and strength. When someone toxic enters your space, they often pull you into their emotional storm. You start adjusting your mood to their mood, your day to their drama, your priorities to their urgency. Self-preservation means stepping out of that storm. Not to ignore the person, but to stay steady enough to decide how to engage. It's about holding on to your inner calm while chaos swirls around you. In workplaces, families, or friendships, self-preservation often looks like creating invisible guardrails. These guardrails aren't walls. They're lanes that guide your interactions so you can stay aligned with your values. Smart people use them to navigate conversations, limit certain topics, or choose when to walk away from conflict. By doing so, they ensure that their role in the dynamic remains constructive instead of reactive. There's also a biological truth to self-preservation. Constant exposure to toxic stress changes the way your brain and body function. Your focus narrows, your decision-making suffers, and your ability to trust your instincts weakens. Smart people take this seriously. They know their well-being isn't just about feelings. It's about the long-term health of their mind and body. Self-preservation requires a shift in mindset from I'm being mean to I'm maintaining my balance. This shift allows smart people to say no without over-explaining, to take breaks without guilt, and to leave situations without burning bridges unnecessarily. It's not about winning or proving a point. It's about staying whole. It's about staying whole. When people accuse you of being selfish for protecting your peace, they're often speaking from their own unmet needs. Smart people don't take that personally. They understand that setting limits might disappoint others, but it prevents resentment and unhealthy dependency from building. They'd rather have a boundary misunderstood today than let a relationship collapse tomorrow. Self-preservation is a commitment to show up for life from a place of strength instead of depletion. It's the recognition that your energy, attention, and emotional health are assets worth guarding. It's the decision to choose long-term stability over short-term appeasement, even when that choice isn't popular. When we talk about a toxic people, it's tempting to treat the word like a name tag, something you slap on someone's chest and walk away from. But that oversimplifies the reality. Dove oversimplifies the reality. People are not inherently toxic. Behaviors are. The problem arises when certain destructive behaviors repeat so consistently that they form a pattern. Smart people don't focus on labeling a person. They focus on recognizing the behaviors that consistently harm trust, stability, or well-being. A toxic pattern often starts subtly. It can be chronic criticism disguised as a just being honest, or manipulation masked as concern. Over time, these moments add up. The behavior becomes predictable, like a script you've seen played out too many times. By noticing these patterns rather than reacting to each incident in isolation, smart people are better equipped to protect themselves without getting caught in the cycle. Not all toxic patterns are loud. Some are quiet, even polite. Some are quiet. Passive-aggressive comments, constant playing of the victim, or strategic withdrawal of affection can be just as damaging as overt aggression. The subtlety often makes them harder to spot because the behavior hides behind a veneer of normalcy. Smart people learn to pay attention not only to what is being said or done, but to how they consistently feel after the interaction. Toxicity is not measured by a single bad day or a moment of weakness. Everyone has moments when they're stressed, impatient, or unkind. What distinguishes toxicity is the absence of change over time. If feedback, empathy, and opportunities for improvement don't shift the behavior, then it's not just a moment. It's a pattern. This distinction keeps smart people from unfairly labeling someone over a temporary lapse. Patterns can also be situational. A person might be warm and respectful in one environment, but manipulative and controlling in another. This doesn't mean they're two different people. It means their toxic behaviors are triggered under certain conditions. Recognizing the context helps smart people adapt their boundaries and expectations accordingly. Some toxic patterns are rooted in control, trying to dominate conversations, decisions, or emotions. Others are rooted in chaos, bringing instability wherever they go. While the motives differ, the impact is similar. The emotional cost on those around them increases, and the space for trust and collaboration shrinks. Smart people track the effect, not just the cause. It's important to remember that identifying a toxic pattern is not about diagnosing someone's personality. It's about understanding the consistent behaviors that create harm and adjusting your response accordingly. This approach keeps the focus on what's actually happening instead of turning it into a moral judgment about the person as a whole. By defining toxicity as a pattern, smart people free themselves from the emotional trap of demonizing or rescuing others. They don't waste energy arguing about whether someone is a good or a bad. They look at the evidence of repeated behavior and decide, with clarity, how much access to give that person to their time, energy, and trust. Reacting is instinctive. It's the quick, unfiltered release of whatever you feel in the moment. When faced with someone's toxic comment, a sharp tone, or an unreasonable demand, your first impulse might be to snap back, defend yourself, or shut down completely. Smart people understand that if you let the other person's behavior dictate your behavior, you've already handed them control of the interaction. Responding is different. Responding is deliberate. It's the pause between stimulus and action, where you decide what outcome you want before you speak or act. That pause is a power move, not because it intimidates the other person, but because it gives you the space to align your words and actions with your values instead of your frustration. When you respond instead of react, you avoid becoming part of the toxic cycle. Toxic people often thrive on triggering emotional outbursts. They know it shifts the focus away from their behavior and onto yours. By staying measured, you deny them the satisfaction of pulling you off balance. You remain anchored while they remain exposed in their own behavior. Responding requires emotional discipline, and that comes from self-awareness. Smart people pay attention to their emotional cues. The tight jaw, the racing thoughts, the urge to interrupt. Those signals tell them they're at risk of reacting impulsively. Instead of charging forward, they slow down. Sometimes by taking a deep breath. Sometimes by saying, "I need a moment to think about that." The pause also allows space for strategy. A reaction might feel good in the moment, but a well-crafted response can influence the direction of the conversation. It can diffuse tension, redirect focus to the real issue, or make it clear that certain behavior won't get a rise out of you. Smart people see every interaction as an opportunity to either escalate or de-escalate, and they choose with purpose. Responding doesn't mean being passive or avoiding confrontation. It means you engage on your terms. You can still call out disrespect, address lies, or correct misrepresentations, but you do it without losing composure. This makes your message stronger because it's not clouded by defensiveness or anger. Over time, consistent responses instead of reactions build a reputation. People learn that you can't be baited, that your mood isn't easily hijacked. This not only discourages toxic behavior, but also attracts people who value respectful, solution-focused communication. Your steadiness becomes part of your influence. Choosing to respond instead of react is not about suppressing emotion. It's about channeling it effectively. Anger can fuel clarity. Frustration can highlight boundaries. Disappointment can inspire better standards. Smart people use that energy to guide their words and actions, not to be consumed by them. Emotional detachment is not about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about creating enough emotional space to see situations clearly. When someone toxic tries to provoke, manipulate, or guilt you, they're often counting on you to get tangled in their emotions. If you're too enmeshed, you lose perspective, and your decisions become reactive rather than intentional. Smart people practice detachment so they can observe without absorbing. This doesn't mean they stop feeling. They still experience empathy, concern, and compassion. The difference is they know where their responsibility ends and the other person's begins. Emotional detachment allows them to care about someone's struggles without carrying the full weight of those struggles themselves. It's a recognition that you can be supportive without becoming a casualty of another person's chaos. Detachment creates a buffer between you and the emotional storms of others. Imagine it like standing under a roof in heavy rain. You can see and hear the downpour, but you're not drenched by it. Toxic people often want you in the rain with them, reacting to every drop. Smart people choose the shelter because it's from that safe place that they can decide if, when, and how to engage. A major part of emotional detachment is refusing to personalize someone else's behavior. If a toxic person is rude, dismissive, or aggressive, smart people understand it's more about the other person's inner state than their own worth. They don't waste energy wondering, what's wrong with me? Instead, they think, that behavior says more about them than it does about me. The detachment also involves managing your emotional investments. Smart people know that if they pour energy into every conflict or every person who demands attention, they'll burn out. They're selective about where they place their emotional resources, choosing battles and relationships that align with their values and purpose rather than with someone else's volatility. It's a skill that gets stronger with practice. At first, detachment can feel like withholding, but over time, you realize it's about showing up in a more grounded way. You still listen, you still engage, but you don't let your emotional state rise and fall with every shift in the other person's tone or attitude. Sometimes emotional detachment requires physical distance. Limiting time spent with toxic individuals, taking breaks from draining conversations, or even creating no-contact periods can help reinforce your boundaries. Smart people use these moments to recalibrate, ensuring they return to the interaction from a place of calm rather than fatigue. Ultimately, mastering emotional detachment means reclaiming control over your inner state. It's the quiet confidence that no matter how turbulent the environment, you choose how much of yourself to give, how much to hold back, and when to walk away without resentment. Setting boundaries without guilt starts with understanding that boundaries are not walls. They are guidelines for how you want to be treated. They are the framework that protects your time, energy, and emotional health. Smart people know that if they don't set these parameters, someone else will set them for them, often in ways that benefit the other person at their expense. Guilt often creeps in because we fear boundaries will make us look selfish, rude, or unkind. This fear is especially strong if we've been conditioned to prioritize other people's comfort over our own needs. Smart people work to reframe this belief. They see boundaries not as rejection, but as a way of making relationships healthier by setting clear expectations and preventing resentment. Boundaries also make your yes more valuable. When you say yes to everything, you dilute your time and energy to the point where you can't give fully to the commitments that matter most. Smart people understand that every no to something that drains them is a yes to something that enriches them. They focus on this trade-off instead of on the discomfort that comes with turning someone down. One of the keys to setting boundaries without guilt is communication. Smart people state their limits clearly, calmly, and without over-explaining. Over-justifying a boundary invites debate, and debate often leads to guilt when the other person pushes back. A clear, respectful statement, without apology, sends the message that the boundary is both thoughtful and firm. Boundaries are easier to hold when you believe in their purpose. Smart people take time to identify the why behind each one. Maybe it's to protect their focus at work, to ensure they have enough rest, or to preserve the quality of their closest relationships. By connecting boundaries to values, they see them as essential, not optional. Toxic people may try to test or ignore your boundaries. This is where guilt can intensify, because holding firm might mean disappointing or upsetting someone. Smart people prepare for this reaction in advance. They remind themselves that other people's discomfort is not proof that the boundary is wrong. It's simply proof that the boundary is being enforced. In professional settings, boundaries are especially critical because blurred lines can lead to burnout or exploitation. Smart people are proactive about clarifying work hours, communication expectations, and decision-making authority. They know that without these limits, toxic patterns can creep in disguised as a team spirit or going the extra mile. Ultimately, setting boundaries without guilt is about owning your right to protect your well-being. It's about recognizing that you can't control how someone else reacts, but you can control the standards you set for your life and the respect you insist on. In your relationships, never joining the toxicity means refusing to mirror the very behaviors you find harmful. It's tempting to match someone's sarcasm with sarcasm, to counter gossip with your own version, or to respond to passive aggression with a jab of your own. In the moment, it can feel like evening the score, but in reality, it pulls you into the same game you were trying to avoid. Smart people understand that once you start playing by toxic rules, you've already lost your footing. Toxicity thrives on escalation. The more you match someone's hostility, the more you feed the cycle. That's why smart people step back and resist the urge to win in the moment. They aim to win in the long term by protecting their credibility and self-respect. Every response is an opportunity to reinforce the standard you hold for yourself, regardless of how the other person is behaving. Refusing to join the toxicity doesn't mean you tolerate bad behavior. It means you confront it without becoming a version of it yourself. You can address lies without lying, set boundaries without belittling, and express anger without attacking. Smart people know that the delivery of the message is just as important as the message itself, especially when dealing with someone who's waiting for you to slip. When you join the toxicity, you risk becoming the distraction. Instead of the focus staying on the toxic behavior of the other person, it shifts to your reaction. This is often what toxic individuals want. They want you to explode so they can point to your behavior as proof that you're the problem. By staying composed, you keep the spotlight exactly where it belongs. Avoiding toxic reciprocity also strengthens your self-discipline. Every time you resist the pull to retaliate, you reinforce the habit of measured, intentional communication. Over time, this becomes second nature. You no longer need to fight the urges hard, because your instinct is to protect your peace instead of your pride. There's also a subtle influence at work when you don't join the toxicity. Your consistent calm can disrupt the patterns of the other person. They may still try to provoke you, but without the reaction they crave, their behavior often loses momentum. It's not about changing them, it's about not letting them change you. Not joining the toxicity requires clarity about your own values. You need to decide ahead of time what lines you won't cross, even under pressure. These pre-decided standards act like an internal compass in the heat of the moment, guiding you toward responses that reflect who you are, rather than who they're trying to make you become. Smart people see every interaction as a choice between rising above or sinking to the same level. By consistently choosing the higher road, they not only preserve their dignity, but also build a reputation for being unshakable in the face of provocation. Limiting exposure to toxic people is not about punishing them. It's about protecting yourself. Just as you wouldn't spend hours in a room filled with smoke, you shouldn't spend endless time in environments filled with emotional pollution. Smart people understand that every interaction leaves an imprint, and repeated exposure to harmful dynamics eventually shapes your mood, mindset, and even your outlook on life. Reducing exposure starts with being honest about the impact a person has on you. This requires paying attention to how you feel before, during, and after each interaction. If you consistently walk away drained, tense, or second-guessing yourself, it's a sign that the relationship may require tighter boundaries. Smart people treat these signals as data, not as something to ignore or rationalize away. Limiting exposure can take many forms. It might mean declining invitations, shortening conversations, or avoiding certain discussion topics. It can mean structuring your work or personal schedule so that you cross paths less often. Smart people see these adjustments not as avoidance, but as strategic resource management, choosing where their time and energy will have the most positive return. Technology adds another layer to exposure. Smart people recognize that toxic influence can reach them through messages, social media, or email. They mute, unfollow, or filter when necessary, not out of spite, but to create a healthier digital environment. Reducing virtual exposure can be just as important as limiting face-to-face contact. There's often a fear that limiting exposure will be noticed or resented. Smart people accept that it might be, But they also know that no one else can prioritize their well-being for them. They're willing to face temporary discomfort if it means avoiding the long-term erosion of their mental and emotional stability. Now, in professional settings, limiting exposure can require diplomacy. You may not be able to avoid a toxic coworker entirely, but you can control the depth of engagement. Smart people keep interactions brief, stick to relevant topics, and resist the pull into personal drama. They maintain professionalism without offering unnecessary access. Sometimes limiting exposure involves building a stronger support network. When toxic interactions are unavoidable, smart people balance them with relationships that are uplifting and nourishing. This helps neutralize the emotional residue left by the toxic person and keeps them from dominating your mental landscape. The core of limiting exposure is recognizing that access to you is a privilege, not a default. Smart people decide who gets their time and attention based on alignment with their values, respect for boundaries, and contribution to mutual well-being. Focusing on your own growth is the most effective way to keep toxic people from dominating your attention. When you channel your energy into learning, improving, and building, you naturally have less space for drama. Smart people understand that what you feed grows, and they choose to feed their skills, mindset, and goals rather than someone else's negativity. Personal growth creates a sense of forward motion. Toxic environments often try to trap you in cycles, replaying the same conflicts, reliving the same frustrations. By committing to your own progress, you create momentum that pulls you out of those loops. You stop orbiting around the toxic person's world and start orbiting around your own vision for the future. Investing in your growth also strengthens your resilience. Every new skill learned, every goal achieved, and every habit built adds another layer of confidence. This makes it harder for toxic people to undermine you because you're no longer relying on their validation to feel secure. Smart people know that the stronger their foundation, the less they're shaken by outside instability. Growth can be both external and internal. External growth might mean advancing in your career, starting a project, or developing a talent. Internal growth means improving emotional intelligence, strengthening boundaries, and cultivating self-awareness. Smart people value both, because toxic people often attack you in both arenas by challenging your competence and by testing your emotional stability. Focusing on your growth doesn't mean ignoring the presence of toxic individuals. It means refusing to let them be the center of your story. Instead of spending hours dissecting their behavior, you spend hours building something meaningful. Over time, this shift in attention changes the entire balance of power in the relationship. There's also a subtle protective effect that comes from growth. As you advance, you often move into environments with higher standards, healthier norms, and stronger support systems. Smart people realize that leveling up their own life can naturally reduce how much they have to deal with toxic influences. Pursuing growth also sends a message, even if you never say a word about it. When you consistently improve yourself, you demonstrate that your time is valuable and that you have a life beyond the toxic dynamic. This can make it harder for toxic individuals to keep you entangled because they no longer see you as fully available for their games. Ultimately, focusing on your own growth is an act of self-respect. It's a declaration that your life's trajectory will not be dictated by someone else's dysfunction. Smart people use every ounce of energy they reclaim from toxic situations to build a version of themselves that is stronger, wiser, and more aligned with the life they want to live.